I hit a place where I couldn't grow anymore. It was part of a bigger corporation, and I just kind of felt like raising my right leg up and stepping forward. If that's all I was going to teach for the rest of my life, I wasn't going to be happy. So that was it. We came out to California. I think maybe it's been about 11 years. I'm not so great with time. I sort of get lost in it all. But basically, I just listened and took the leap.
I love that. I feel like this year for me, that showed up for me in a plant ceremony recently where listen was my word. And that's been my word for this year. And interestingly enough, my gene keys along with my human design says that is actually my gift, is in listening. And so I was like, ooh, I'm really going to lean into that this year. And I want to be able to use listening as the skill of what are the things that I'm hearing, but also what are the words that aren't being said in between sentences or in between things that are happening.
The highest teachings always say the true self is found in the silence. Even in between the mantra Om, the whole idea of chanting is you pay attention to that sliver of sound. You might just hear your true self, the God spark, the whatever that is indescribable within us. And I do talk to my clients a lot in my group, the Ashram, that a lot of people are afraid to sit with themselves because the world is telling us to speed up. Social media is sending us algorithms to go faster and faster. We have to really take a stand against that and create this silence, even if it's for 3 minutes a day, because I think once someone gets used to 3 minutes, they're like, give me another minute, give me a few more seconds. Let me stay here. And then they start to hear, or they feel, or they calm down, or they know, or they trust, whatever it is. Something good happens once we're willing to be in that place.
Yes, so calming on the nervous system for people that if you're listening today and this is news to you and you're going 5,000 miles an hour, the act of literally just stopping, taking a few deep breaths, even if it's only for a few seconds, but ideally if you could sit there and do that for minutes, it will bring so much peace to your day in a way that will literally shift the energy around you in some beautiful ways. And I love to call that a state change, right? Yeah. So it's coming anytime I'm in a little bit of a funk or things feel weird, or maybe a call was awkward. It's like, how can I reset? Yeah. And that's the beautiful way to do it, is to actually just stop and breathe. And I think as we all work out our journey, we figure out what is the best pit stop for us along the way. Is it a meditation? Some people are like, oh, meditation, I can't be quiet that long. It just doesn't feel good. I'm like, then don't do a quiet meditation. Yeah, right. Go take a walking meditation. Go take a screaming meditation. Go, do whatever works for you, but know that there are modalities out there. There's tapping. Gosh, there's so many different modalities these days, and having the practice of yoga and knowing that even in yoga, there's many different kinds of yoga practices. I think that's the other thing that a lot of people aren't fully aware of sometimes, of knowing like there's fast yoga and then there's slow yoga, there's hot yoga, there's not hot yoga.
Right, there's yin yoga. I think it's so important, because we can start to hear something attach and then think we have to do something in a certain way. And one of the stunning things that when I traveled to India, really my first trip there, I learned something very intense about just who I was and karma, but also about meditation. And, I teach meditation. I have guided meditations. I love it. Yet when we go to the absolute, and I love going to the absolute because I just feel like it's a bit of a metric. Like if we really know the highest standard, we can at least face forward, right? We can lead our direction. And meditation is actually not a practice, it's an arrival. The practice comes in letting go of desires that might not be good for us. We can have desires, but it's like walking up the ladder. You replace a lower desire with a higher. The practice is living in love and harmony with our fellow beings and ourselves. So the more that we practice calming down, the meditative mind, you arrive.
Not feeling good enough, and so much so that I would really break my moral code, for myself, to my family, and I would start to sell drugs. Like my family was giving me money, they were supporting me in college. Like I didn't need it, and it showed me that I was willing to literally break the law and get arrested by the DEA just to fit in and to be loved.
Ooh, wow.
That was the experience. maybe in another episode, we can go into everything that I did in that process and what I learned from business from, building that kind of business first. No, just kidding.
No, thank you for sharing that.
Affiliates and building a team.
Yes. Wholesale, retail, numbers.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. No, I think this is such a great share. So thank you first off for sharing vulnerably and openly, because I think so many times people can look at their past and say, that's all. Maybe they're sitting in some shame around their past because it was because it was a challenge, because it doesn't sound like it was perfect. And that shame can keep them from sharing to let other people know that, like, hey, life happens. We all don't make perfect decisions all the time. And there's some different paths we can go down. We also have the power to change our path. We also have the power to make some different decisions and have a different kind of outcome. And I think that's really, the point. The point is, look at you today, right? Like, you've helped so many entrepreneurs. We run around so many of the same circles. It's really been so much fun. It's fun to play in this circle with you. It's really fun to play on this playground with you. So thank you for that. Well, the other thing I'll say is, I feel like you're someone who's been also magnificent at creating play in your life. And the one place I really see it show up is in your relationship. And that's actually what today's topic is really about, is love and relationships, and how do we integrate fun so that it always feels sparkly? Because I think that's the thing. People are like, oh, that spark's going to fizz eventually. It's like, okay, but can we respark? Like, what does that look like? And also clearing resentments. I feel like you are a pro at this in your relationship, that you and Jennifer have this nailed down. And I would love for you to share that today with folks, because what I want to tell everyone is Alex is going to share probably about stacks. Can we talk about stacks? Yes. So we're going to talk about stacks. And what I did is I took what he taught me about stacks and his relationships, and I actually applied it to my folks in business, especially when I have business partners, business brothers, business sisters, business close friends, and it works like magic. And it's been pivotal, instrumental, even in my own relationships, as I rediscover being single again, and like what that feels like, and walking into new relationships, of making that the standard and the beginning versus a new boundary that I'm trying to pivot into. So Alex, please, let's talk about how you have intentionally constructed a really intentional, beautiful relationship with Jennifer, and how you all work through challenges and how you make sure that resentments don't build up.
I would say my favorite, talking about my relationship with Jennifer, is definitely my favorite topic to talk about. It's the most incredible thing I've ever experienced in my life. It's so catalytic. It's so abundant. It's so profitable. It's so intimate and connective. It's everything. Like, it blows my mind every day. We've been together almost 6 years. Next month, we have been together for 6 years, and it keeps getting better every day. I want to start by sharing, though, that this is just my own experience in my relationship, and really listen from the lens of take the stuff that works and leave what doesn't. I would also challenge you, if the things that you think aren't going to work, to really see what's underneath that. And if it's like feels true for you and it feels aligned, that no, that's not something that I want to do, great. But if you feel that and it feels stretchy because you know that it's uncomfortable, then the invitation is to do it, because that's really at the ethos of my relationship with Jennifer, is growth. We have a values-driven, vision-driven relationship, and the values are so important. So one of our top values is growth, and we have similar set of values, and those values can change over. We've been together for 6 years, and sometimes the values are similar, but the priority of what is first sometimes changes. Like, we are engaged right now. We're getting married this year. So there's going to be a shift in alignment in our values, which reflects our life, which reflects how we interact with our inner circle of friends, which reflects our calendar, what we say yes to, what we say no to. So the values piece is super important. And I believe one of the key core energetics of our relationship is growth. And we love growth. And we also know that growth and comfortability are polar opposites. So we lean into those. And there's something that I forget if Jennifer or I shared it, but I'm going to give her the credit. I think she said it, where we know that we're going to work through our shit in any relationship, and working through all of my own stuff with her is the person that I want to work through my stuff with the rest of my life. So, she came up with the concept. I'm just reiterating it because it just feels so true. So we have the hard conversations fast so that there's ease and there's grace in our relationship. And we're both entrepreneurs. We both run separate companies. We have collaborated on a couple of different projects and companies as well. So there's a lot that goes on in our relationship.
Yeah, so one of the things I love to share through my teachings and programs and really just my, my speeches or however Spirit is guiding me to help individuals is our mess can be our message and our pain can be our purpose. So I grew up in a mentally, physically, verbally, emotionally abusive home. My mom, doing the best she could, has borderline personality disorder. So she's extremely mentally ill. So that's the cross between borderline personality disorder and is like bipolar and schizophrenic. So I didn't grow up in a home that was consistent, to say the least. My feelings weren't really valid. It was hurry up, get over it. There was just a lot of abuse in my home. And so I, of course, found my way to cheerleading so that I could pretend everything was okay and I could cheer other people on and kind of avoid what was going on at home. I say this all the time, cheerleading really did save my life. But I navigated through life with a bit of blinders on. Okay? And with my dad being an addict, he was sober the last 13 years of his life, and him crossing over and not really having solid foundations and growing up in such abuse, it creates an impact. And I find that many of us will overcompensate based upon what we went through, whether it be trying to gain our self-worth, and I say in all wrong places, and of course that ended me up in Hollywood, and ended me up on my path to being a TV host for 10 years and a red carpet correspondent, interviewing every celebrity from Sandra Bullock to Adam Sandler and anyone in between, and really looking for ways to kind of fill this void in my heart of my enoughness. And no matter what celebrity I interviewed or what jet I was flying on with my friend that was a billionaire, it never had me feel like it was enough, right? There was this void, right? And I had every job under the sun, from being a nanny to being a reality star, being a nanny on television, to, throwing EDM festivals, to working in the agency space, to working at William Morris, working at CBS television. It never had me feel like I mattered and I was worthy of my purpose. So I went through this really gnarly dark night of the soul. I'll spare you the details, but I basically walked off the set of E! News after my fifth call back and didn't realize I didn't be on television anymore. But I felt so sad because my entire life that's all I ever wanted. It was like one of those moments where you're like getting the thing that you wanted in your life, but you realize now that you don't want it anymore. So you're like, well, who am I? So around that time, I was going through a really traumatic breakup with a man I was madly in love with, the greatest heartbreak to date. And found out he was a sex addict and he was having sex with strangers. So my relationship was dead. Therefore, it activated my dad's death that I didn't process, that I just put on the shelf. So my dad was dead, my biggest cheerleader. My relationship was dead. My dream was dead. And I literally found myself suicidal. And that night, I almost went and killed myself and drank an entire bottle of NyQuil PM. And I ended up going on a hike with a friend who was in an emotional intelligence training that actually enrolled me into it over margaritas on Sunset Boulevard at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday.
Wow.
Because that's what I did back then to suppress my pain. And she was like, I was like, when is it? She's like, tomorrow. And I'm like, she goes, you got anything to do? And I had just wrapped my show on TV, so I did it. So case in point, that moment changed my life. And I took this training that gave me the tools and the processes to really dive deep into all this pain that I had been putting on a shelf and avoiding and pretending everything was okay and bypassing it with all the things that I wanted to bypass with. In my case, it was the search of fame and self-worth. So from that space, I realized my purpose on this planet wasn't to talk shit about celebrities. It was actually to support people, including myself, remind myself that I love myself, no matter what my purpose matters. And so from that place, I was able to transform my pain into my purpose. All of the neglect, the shame, the doubt, the lack of self-worth, I was able to transmute that and pay that forward. And so teaching others how to do the same. That oftentimes these things that happen to us, whether they're sexual trauma or they're, I grew up in severe scarcity on food stamps and was able to break that narrative and, earn over $1 million in my business to date without going to college. Like really realizing that once like all these things that happen to us aren't just to happen to us. I truly believe we all have a soul contract.
Yeah.
And I believe that we create these contracts before we came with our parents, with our biggest heartbreak, with our friends, our employers, our employees, so that we can live where we can learn the lessons that will help our soul grow and evolve. And as soon as we come out of, as Matt Kahn shares, Lightworker training, which is victim consciousness, which is vague this to me. It's my mom's fault, it's my dad's fault, it's my ex, right? And that was very much the space I was in, this victim narrative of like, woe is me, all these things that happened to me, but I was the common denominator of never feeling enough. The common denominator of working a million jobs and never feeling like it was there. Searching, finding the love in all the wrong places. I'm the common denominator from the frequency of the victim consciousness. I was attracting all those experiences, and I wouldn't trade them at all. But I was able to pivot and take all that pain, pay it forward to my purpose, and show other people how to do the same. You can get paid for these things. You can be a teacher, right? So you go from Lightworker in training, which is victim consciousness, into Earth Angel, which is Lightworker in physical form, which is that beautiful bridge and that transformation of the journey of it didn't happen to me, it happened for me. And how can I use this, what I've learned, to help at least one person avoid any unnecessary pain, shame, or suffering.
Sure.
By paying forward, right? We see that with books, we see that with television or anything in life, and I think that's really when you start to feel that wholeness and that completeness, so that you really own that I chose this, these were my lessons, this was my spiritual curriculum, and the pain stops when you learn the lesson. And then from that really empowered space, you know, you can stand on stage and, or in your own life, you can just show up in such a way that helps people not feel so alone. And that's what I think that I meant probably by that quote. And I always say as well, like, you're never going to be broke when you are living your purpose and utilizing your gifts.
I also want to mention that Yanik has the Cosmic Oracle cards as well. And these are fantastic. So that's not quite in there, but I have to say that these are some of my favorites. Ooh, I would love that. Are we going to pull a card today? Yay.
Yeah,
let's do it. Let's do it. Let's show them how it works. Dun, dun,
All right.
Dun, dun. Let me shuffle.
Oh,
They're
you're
really
pulling one
beautiful.
first. All right, let's do it.
Oh, are you pulling on your end?
Oh, go for it.
Oh, I was going to
love
pull
it.
on my end, but we can
Let's
go
do
either
it.
way on this. Yes? Okay. By the way, these are what they look like. Beautiful. All right, what card do they have for us today? Going with top card. All right, here we go. You are at the divine Y point.
This has showed up a lot with the one reading I did the other day, and then for me too. So,
Oh.
want to read it or want me to read it?
Oh, and the card is 33.
Yeah, of course it is.
Can I mention that as well? Both you and I have some resonance with 33. Why don't you read it?
Okay, I'll
Okay.
read it. Okay. Or I could have the Cosmic Sloth read it.
And this is Yanik's drawing, by the way. Yanik does all these amazing doodles. He actually showed me his journal while we were in Costa Rica, and there's literally doodles on everything. And so the fact that we get like some insight into your cards and your doodles is actually amazing as well.
Yeah. So the card, as you showed him, is this Y, and it says you're at a divine Y point, and at each moment in time and space, there's a choice point. It's been called the divine Y by some of the sages. You are now at such a point. Where will you go, left or right? Each branch leads to new possibilities, and in turn, even more new possibilities. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming until you realize how to navigate with your heart. It's not just a Y, but a Y, W-H-Y. What is your greatest why for where you are headed? Why do you truly want to evolve, exploring your greatest impact and contribution, and then your heart is your GPS here, navigating the journey. And the good news is there's no wrong turns or choices. You just keep getting rerouted and rerouted and rerouted back again by your galactic guides, arriving at the same perfect destination in the stars.
I love that. I love that. Has that meant anything to you recently?
Yeah. I mean, it always shows up around. So here's the catalyst around it, which is the prompt, which is what choice point am I facing right now, and what is my greatest why for navigating through it. So, I mean, just recently when I was playing with it, it was around like, how much of my art do I really lean into, and is it business plus a little bit of art, or is it like really going all in on the art and more of like a little bit of business, and so how do you navigate that? And it's your heart. Your heart is like, I say that your heart, like following your heart is frequently scary, but never wrong.
Oh, I love that.
And it's not just one, right? So, and then the other part of it, because we're both entrepreneurs in the business world, so it's not like neglecting our head, right? Our head is the business side or the marketing side or whatever it is. I think it's like connecting your head, your heart, and then even your higher purpose and putting that in alignment. So your higher purpose is like, why are you here? Like, why'd you decide to come play in this, in this spot at this exact time and space too?
What advice do you have for someone who is an entrepreneur who is still in the my why is a lot of things, but one of the big whys for them might still be I need to like pay my mortgage, I need to take care of my family. Like they're very much still feeling the financial side of those things, right? So like for that entrepreneur, how do they really lean into their heart when I think that the head and the logic are going to have a very strong pull of saying, well, we're going to do this because, we need the money. Like, what do you say to that person?
Well, it's probably, you're going to be in a spot like that pretty much forever until you make some sort of change, whatever that why point is, and going deeper with the why. So like, for instance, I'll go back and I started in the internet digital marketing world in 2000 and did pretty well with one of my first products called Instant Sales Letters. And that really took off, and people were like, oh, how'd you do that? Could you teach me? I'm like, okay. So then I started teaching people how to take their information and their knowledge and share that online and sell it. And, there's so many places I go to these events or seminars, even if I wasn't speaking, and someone would be like, oh my God, Yanik, you changed my life. I sell guitar lessons now online or whatever it is. I train, how to train parakeets or whatever, right? And they're like, you changed my life. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. And at the same time, I had this, like, I call it cosmic alarm clock that went off, and your cosmic alarm clock is usually like this little smaller, tiny voice that gets louder and louder until you either hit snooze or you answer it. And so for me, it was around a question. I love questions, right? So your questions really dictate your answers. And the question was, am I happy? Would I be happy doing what I'm doing 10 years from now? So when I was really honest in my journal, and I'm a big fan of journaling, maybe we'll talk about that. And so when I was really honest, it was like, no, that's not my ultimate. And so I'm like, okay, well, what would it be? And I drew these 3 interconnected circles, and originally it was a $, a happy face, and a heart. So it's like, make more money, have more fun, give more back. It was the original sort of 3 parts to it, and that became Maverick. And it was like Maverick Business Adventures. It was like, all right, we're going to take people on these, my friends and other people I like, on these amazing adventures. We combine it with business, combine it with some charity element, and there we go. That'd be my ultimate. And then about $400,000 in, my wife's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, I have no idea. But so at that point, I had already this head, heart, higher purpose, like all the alignment stuff. I was like, some of this other stuff, I'm like, this doesn't work. I don't want this. Like I was just cutting away all these other things. And so I was in this spot where I really needed the money for, and it wasn't working. I had savings, and it wasn't like down to my last penny or anything, but it was in a spot where it's like, all right, well, what are you doing? And so I connected back to my why, and the why wasn't to build an adventure travel company. So I could have easily gone back. I call it like golden handcuffs. I could have easily gone back to the digital marketing world, just done what I was doing, and I'm sure it would have been fine. But I feel like your soul dies a little bit each day when you're not truly doing what you're meant to be doing, and that's that whole following your heart, which is often scary, but never wrong. And so the why wasn't building an adventure travel company. It was to change the way business is played. And so it was a lot of deep reflection and a lot of self-identity that was so tied in, as entrepreneurs, we're so tied into like if we're successful, then our identities are positive, and like our net worth equals our net wealth, and you know, like all these things, right? Like it's all like it's so tied in, and I was at the spot where it's like, you know, I built 7-8 different projects, all hit the 7-figure mark without really trying, and then like I had this thing that I care a lot more about, and I'm like, this is not working. Like, why the hell is this not working?
Right.
And I really do feel like we need a new way of being, because as we evolve, like the old blueprints don't totally work, and so I had to go back to like rock bottom of like, all right, what is, I had been studying personal growth, transformation type stuff since I was like 17, in my car, like listening to like Earl Nightingale and Brian Tracy and then other marketing people, and then, you know, you name it. My car would be like littered with all these tapes, and I played ice hockey, and my friends would get in there and be like, what the hell are this? I'm like, don't worry, you're not gonna like any of these. You know, I'll turn on the radio for you or whatever. But, so, you know, I thought I was pretty well, you know, figured out, but I'm like, all right, there's something more here. And it really was this deep exploration of the why. And then again, questions, right? Like, so one of my favorite questions during this time was, what would my 111-year-old self tell me? And that one I answered with my non-dominant hand, with my left hand. And I wrote, light 1,000 suns who each have the potential to light another 1,000 suns. I'm like, huh, like that's really interesting. And then so we changed so many things in what we're doing with Maverick, where it was like more about the mission, even more so. I mean, it already had a mission, but it was even more about that mission to change the way business is played. And
What do you know now that you wish you had known before you started this journey of who you've become?
Yeah, first, thank you for letting me be here, and I'm buzzing right now, so I just thought I'd share that. Yeah, you know, this is an easy one for me, and that's just the gift and the blessing of loving yourself. This is something that I wish I knew many moons ago, you know, because that is the greatest gift we have. And of course, I learned through, you know, hard experiences and a lot of trial and error, so to speak. But to me, it's foundational. You know, loving yourself, building the most beautiful relationship with yourself is so foundational. And it branches off to every core of your life. It branches off to, other intimate relationships or friendships, or how you show up and the way you are and all these things in life. I believe it's so foundational, and it affects so many parts of you and the things that you do. Now, there's a flip to that, obviously, because had I not had all those experiences, I wouldn't become who I am today as well. So, of course, I would have loved to have known that, you know, years back. But at the same time, I believe that in my world, and I'm sure some of your listeners as well as you, is like, you know, we sign up for these things before we come into this physical. And so, you know, it's like, okay, this is my journey, right? So how do I know what it is to be so loved when I didn't know how to love myself, right? So there's that polarity of everything.
Right.
And so I love that. And so that, for me, that's been, out of everything, out of all my business endeavors and all the people I've met and all the things I've done, that is probably the most and biggest nugget in my life, is learning that, just to build the most beautiful relationship with me.
With yourself. I love that. And I think that, you know, the standard is kind of set on whether you, when I say the standard, meaning the assumption, is typically set on that we're always looking to love someone else and be loved, right? Because that's what we see in movies. That's where rom-coms come from, right? It's finding your true love. And I don't know that there's a lot of people out there, at least in mass media, who are touting self-love, or, you know, I don't know a lot of shows that are really zoning in on how to love yourself. So the first question I would have around that is, how can someone identify whether they're really loving themselves or not? Like, what does that look like? Like, is there a quiz? Is there a test? How does someone actually either come to the realization of like, wow, I don't know that I'm loving myself as much as I can? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, and I'll answer that in my own experiences and also clients I've worked with. You know, you come to a point in your life where, And it's not always like you said, I didn't grow up in a family, I'm not sure about you, but I didn't grow up in a family where we were taught to love ourselves. It wasn't a normal thing, right? So in the process of life and experiences, I started to see patterns where I was looking for validation from others, where I wasn't feeling like I was enough. And I needed that affirmation from other people to feel better. But I realized in many occasions that wasn't sustainable in any way, you know. And so when you get to a point, and some people get it right in the beginning, maybe when they're teenagers, maybe when they're even younger, because it goes back to F. One of the F's I talk about is foundation. You know, what did you grow up with? And it's not right or wrong. Our parents did the best jobs they can do. They learned from their parents. It's generational. It's, you know, so they do the best they can, right? So depending on the household you grew up in, the environment that you were involved with has a big play in that. So for me, it was a lot of experience. And for a lot of my clients, the same. They just went through many trials and tribulations that knocked them to a point where they were like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Like, I give up. Like, something doesn't seem right here. They stopped blaming others. They got out of the victim mode for a moment because they hit the ground so freaking hard, and it woke them up to say, okay, wait a minute, maybe I need to look at myself here. And then from that point, you start breaking that down, and you start looking at all the patterns that, you know, that start, you know, coming to your mind. And you know, I would do many different, I had many different modalities that I would use, writing down on a piece of paper, making a list. And of course I had coaches and I had help too. But that's the biggest thing, like understanding, you know, how do you feel about yourself? You know, do you give yourself the time? Do you give yourself a break? Do you look at yourself in the mirror? And, you know, it's not about like loving yourself. If you asked me what that meant 25 years ago, I would be like, what? I'm supposed to kiss myself? You know, what does that mean? I didn't know what that meant, you know, but it's like, you really look at the mirror and see yourself and know the miracle that was created to be in this physical body. Like the power that you have in knowing who you are as a human being from a spiritual place, and the just the gift to be here. And when you start to come to these realizations, you start to fall more in love with you, and you start to understand the gifts that were given to you to appreciate life. And yeah, a lot of people talk about that, you know, but when you can get out of the victim mode, when you can start taking responsibility for your life, and when you can really stop looking for validation from other people and know that you're already enough, because you have to be, that's why we're here. And that's just one way to start.
What do you know now that you wish you had known before you really started life, you know, like, and when I say started life, I mean, you know, when I'd say like 18, 19, we start to wonder like, oh, what's my path? What's the world? What's love? What are all these things? Like what were maybe some of your like beliefs and thoughts that you had back then that now you're just like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking?
Great question. I'd say that probably the number one thing is that all is well, and that I'm doing it perfectly. That the idea of doing it right, doing it wrong, all of that is just a construct, and that all is well all the time, even in the challenges, even in the dark times, and that you're gonna experience that at some point in your life, sweetheart, talking to myself. I know that now. And I also know now that all feedback is love. And that is something I did not know back in the day, that all feedback is love. It didn't, even because not all feedback feels like love. So
Sure. So how do you define like feedback versus criticism?
Well, when you're living really from a spiritual perspective, criticism is just feedback. And so feedback is the umbrella that you choose to view all of life through. So whether something comes through as criticism or negative feedback or attacking feedback even, or positive feedback, all of it is feedback and all of it is love from the perspective of not spiritually bypassing, from the perspective of everyone's just trying to get their needs met. And so my experience of life is not the same as somebody else's experience because it's my unique lens and their unique lens. And so even if I do or say something to upset somebody else and they offer me feedback that doesn't feel good, I get to choose how I receive the feedback that's here for me. And so if somebody is expressing in a negative way, if that negativity is received from me, by me, with loving ears and a loving heart, then that negative feedback lands and that person doesn't have to hold the burden of that negativity anymore. It gets to just dissolve into the love, and love is infinite.
Yes, yes, and yes. I love that. I know one of the reframes I gave myself around that is, how can I allow other people to share their opinion? And also look at it from the perspective of, is any of this true for me? And can I see some of these things that might be coming across, or is there a perception here based on some limited information? And for what's true, if it needs correction, can I be really open to that and saying, like I have some areas for growth here? Or can I also look at it and go, ooh, wow, yeah, no, that doesn't apply to me.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that up because for honestly, most of my life, it was very hard to give me feedback. I was a know-it-all. I knew everything. It was very challenging to give me any kind of feedback. I would get defensive, and I can be quite articulate, and so I could articulate a reason why whatever is coming at me was not accurate, or point out the one part that wasn't true versus receiving all of the wisdom from the other person of what's true for them in their experience, which makes it true, period. It's not just true for them. If it's true for somebody else, it is true. And therefore, that's why I've trained myself to receive any feedback at any time from anyone for any reason. And that is not something that I was skilled at in the past. In fact, if you ask probably any family members or friends from decades ago, they would say, yeah, Marla's very hard to give feedback to. I couldn't let it in. It was too scary to let in negative feedback because I was already so self-critical that any more would just collapse me. And so, the sort of hard exterior was a protection from my very sensitive insides, how I actually was feeling. And so over the years, I've sort of dissolved those barriers and the defense mechanisms to receive. And that's really living a very tender-hearted life, because it's tender-hearted when someone offers you criticism or negative feedback. I have a whole practice around that now of, asking people intentionally for negative feedback so that we don't have any grains of sand between us, so that there's harmony in our union of our friendships. That's important to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's really beautiful. And I think that's also one of the things that is such a beautiful practice. And if more people did it, would probably realize their relationships are much richer. Because instead of sweeping things under the carpet while the other person builds resentment, or the person doing the sweeping is usually the one building the resentment, you're allowing it to get on the table. And you're allowing it to let's literally put all our cards on the table so we can look and see good, bad, ugly. What do you know now that you wish you had known before you started this whole journey? But first,
so happy to be here, and we're talking on one of my favorite topics of self-love. And if you would have asked me years ago if I had self-love, I would have said, yeah, I do, definitely. But it wasn't really always that way. So in 2014, I was an attorney, and I had just invested $100,000 with a mentor to help me grow my law firm. And at one of his conferences, he says, "What's the highest version of your life?" Well, for me, first and most importantly, I'm recently divorced, and I want to have a crazy close relationship with my 4-year-old daughter, Colette. Second, I live like the world is my playground, and I want to be surrounded by a group of friends who does the same thing. And third, I really want to have a partner where we can live and grow and travel together. 4 years later, I'm at a private beach resort in Mexico with the new love of my life. We met in a hot summer night in Zambia, and now we live together, and Colette loves him and I love him, and we're there together with a group of friends who have been traveling the world with us. So we're outside in this paradise under a straw-thatched roof having dinner when I start having this crazy out-of-body experience. I consciously created all of